Here is the latest Higher Summits forecast brought to you by our friends at the Mount Washington Observatory.
Weather above treeline in the White Mountains is often wildly different than at our trailheads. Before you hike, check the Higher Summits forecast at mountwashington.org. Weather observers working at the nonprofit Mount Washington Observatory write this elevation-based forecast every morning and afternoon. Search and rescue teams, avalanche experts, and backcountry guides all rely on the Higher Summits forecast to anticipate weather conditions above treeline. You should too. Go to mountwashington.org or text forecast to 603-356-2137. Here's your forecast for Friday, August 4th and Saturday, August 5th. Friday, there's a cold front coming in, and this may provoke some severe thunderstorms with gusty winds, small hail, and frequent lightning, especially in the afternoon hours. So be careful for flash flooding in the neighboring ravines and notches. And Saturday, in the early morning hours, there may be some rain showers, but there may also be some part clearing. So that'll be nice. So be careful for that earlier part of the forecast. So Friday, in the clouds with rain showers, scattered afternoon thunderstorms. Some thunderstorms could become severe and produce heavy rainfall, strong and gusty winds, small hail, and frequent lightning with a low in the 50s. Winds west at 35 to 50 miles an hour, decreasing to 25 to 40 miles per hour. However, higher winds could occur with thunderstorm activity. Oh boy, here we go. Wind chill, 25 to 35 above and then rising. Ooh, it's starting to get a little cool. Friday night, in the clouds with rain showers, chance of thunderstorms early. Early thunderstorms might produce heavy rainfall or strong winds with a low in the mid-40s. Winds shifting northwest at 25 to 40 miles an hour, decreasing to 20 to 35 miles per hour. And then for Saturday, in and out of the clouds, trending towards in the clear late under mostly cloudy skies with a high around 50. Northwest winds at 20 to 35 miles an hour, increasing to 25 to 40 miles per hour with gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Alrighty, have a good time out there and be careful for those colder temps. It's a little cooler than usual this time of the year. Alrighty, bye.
From the Woodpeckers studio in the great state of New Hampshire, welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast, where we discuss all things related to hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Here are your hosts, Mike and Stomp.
All right, Stomp, take two. As I was saying, I had an epiphany this weekend when I was watching you do your DJing activity.
Okay. What was it?
Well, because when I think of DJs, like I think of like my middle school dancers where like there would be like this, it was usually like we were like in middle school, so it was always like an older kid, like maybe like a 20-something-year-old kid that would just like play records. So when I think of DJs, I just think of like people just playing records, but you're actually like playing sort of an instrument, like, because I'm trying to talk to you, but you're very busy with like all the switches and circular stuff. Yeah. And I realize like you're actually playing like an instrument. You're like an artist. It's not just like loading a record in and letting it do its thing.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm glad you noticed. I appreciate that because it is. I mean, when I play, I try to legit like mix one song to the next and match the beats and make it interesting for people. And Yeah, it's not just pressing buttons and letting it go on its own. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I feel like this is probably about the 10th time I've seen you do like a gig, and I finally figured it out. So I'm impressed.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm getting better and better at it.
Yeah, I'm proud of you. So, very good.
Oh, boy.
So, Stomp, we had a big weekend. We had Emily's hike recap here, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I think we should say hello to Luke and Jaime right now.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for joining us. We have them live in person at the studio here. So we lock the cats out, so we should be safe for a little while, right?
Yeah, until they start knocking.
You're right. But this is going to be a really great time, and really appreciate you guys coming out. They just did a hike locally that we'll talk about too. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys letting us join in on your date night.
Yeah, no worries.
Excellent. So we'll introduce Luke and Jaime in a minute here. But before we do the show intro, Stomp, do you want to talk about Emily's hike, or do you just want to go right into the intro?
Well, I mean, we can touch upon it briefly, but I think it was a success in general. Everybody was concerned about the weather, obviously, because there was a call for rain, and so different, right? A call for rain. That's unusual, huh? But so I think it went off without a hitch, pretty much. Most of the teams finished that I'm aware of. I hosted Cannon. I took a team of 7 up to the summit, and no problems there. On the worst trail in the Whites, Kinsman Ridge Trail. I don't know if you've ever hiked that, Jaime or Luke, but boy, that trail is so rough. And so it was a nice time. I hear that the funds were met that they were looking for, like well over $80K, approaching $100,000.
Yep, that's what I hear. And for the listeners, if you're not familiar, what we're talking about is the Emily Sotelo. I forget the actual name of the foundation, but there's a foundation, and they partnered with the Hiking Buddies 501c3 organization to do a fundraising hike last weekend. So they raised just under $100,000, I think, and those funds are going to go towards education for awareness around safety and hiking. So Emily's family is trying to put some effort around building out this foundation to try to prevent future accidents. But there was, I think, somewhere around 25 to 30 separate hikes that went on over the weekend, and hikers raised money, and then there was an after party as well, which is what I was talking about earlier, what Stomp was working on his DJ activity. So it was good stuff.
At Breton Woods. That was the first time I've been to Breton. What a huge lodge that is. Do you guys ski?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever done that mountain?
I have been to Breton Woods.
Yeah, I was impressed.
We do a lot with Gunstock because the kids being younger, they have a good school program. It's short drive, 20 minutes away.
Gotcha. Yeah, very nice.
Yep.
So.
And I was on Garfield, so I led a hike with, I think, 8 other hikers. So I had a great group. I knew a couple of them I had met or known before, but mostly new people. And I think we got on trail around 8 o'clock. Ended up wrapping up right around 3 o'clock and got right over to Breton Woods. But it was cool. We saw Littlefoot was out there with Kim and Mark, her grandparents. So we saw them coming down. And then the second we got right up onto the summit, it had been cloudy, but it cleared up for us. So we had views out to Franconia Ridge and across the Pemmy Wilderness. So it was perfect timing.
Yeah, same for us. The second we got to the summit, we took a picture of the group with complete whiteout conditions, and like just behind us to the west, it cleared. It was so nice. So we have these 2 pictures within 5 minutes of each other with white and then pure sun. Super cool. It was a nice time. So
yeah. And I think there was around 300 people at the after party at Breton Woods. Ton of people that had been on the show previously, a bunch of friends. I think Stomp, we'll probably have some folks on to do a deeper recap on this, but I think we do want to give a shout out to Ben Pease, our friend Lynn, who supports us on the show. Ben and Lynn really worked to pull this all together, along with Andrew Barlow and Julie from the Hiking Buddies. I think there's a bunch of other people behind the scenes, but we can't say thank you to everybody. And then Emily's family, her parents and sister were involved as well. So congratulations to all of you. And everybody grieves differently, but I think that putting effort into trying to build out an educational foundation and get the word out around safety is a great noble cause. So happy to be involved, and hopefully this will be an annual event.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. All right. So welcome to episode 116 of the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast. So we are a podcast that discusses all things hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains. This week we are joined by Chief Warrant Officer 3, Luke Koladish. So Luke is an Instructor Pilot and Aviation Safety Officer for the New Hampshire Air National Guard. He's one of the people who is flying on the Blackhawk helicopters when missions are activated that require air support. So we're excited to learn about his career and talk about the operations behind air missions in New Hampshire. In addition to that, his wife Jaime is here, so we can get her perspective as well. And she's probably got some good stories, I bet. Yeah. So happy to have them both here. So in addition to them, we have a recap of Emily's hike, which we just talked about. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the specific hikes. Stomp has a new piece of gear that he wants to review. We've got a tornado that hit New Hampshire. And then we've got recent hikes on Garfield, Cannon, Algonquin Ridge, Pleasant Mountain in Maine, and then Jaime and Luke said they did a hike today too, so we'll talk about that and some recent search and rescue news. So I'm Mike.
And I'm Stomp. Let's get started. Hey, Mike, excellent. I think based upon the smirks over here, you may have committed a pronunciation flub.
It happens every time.
It happens like every day. So how do you pronounce the last name?
It's Koladish. That's right. Not
Koladish.
Yeah, Koladish.
I did Koladish.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Stop.
Yes, sir.
You're supposed to like get this information immediately and tell me.
Oh, sorry, bud.
And does it, like, when you say, am I supposed to say Chief Warrant Officer 3? Does the 3 matter, or is it just Chief?
Well, it does. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
It does. But you did great on the rank. It's just the name could have had some improvement.
All right. I'll do better. I promise. So I was never in the military, so I'm always nervous about like getting the right level and all that stuff. But
you can go with Luke from here on out.
Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt that last name anymore. So, but Stomp, we got a tornado that happened in southern New Hampshire. So I didn't really pay attention to this, but what's going on here?
Wow,
Did you survive?
It was the lead up to the Emily hike too. So just the crazy weather. It was an EF1 that landed in southwestern New Hampshire. Basically, it was an EF1, 95 mile an hour winds, and it left a 13-mile long path from Keene. You guys down around there, Keene area? Somewhat?
It's a bit of a haul, but...
Yeah. Roughly? Okay. So from Keene all the way over to Dublin. And it was 200 yards wide, and it leveled, I guess, hundreds of trees and damaged roofs and everything else. So that's pretty notable story there.
Yeah, I know there's been a couple of warnings recently, but hopefully we're past. It's cooled off a bit, so hopefully we're past this little window of unstable weather, and we can avoid tornadoes.
Yeah, for sure. Nobody got injured, thankfully.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Stomp. I'm going to put something up on my screen here, and I want you guys to take a look at this, because this is a beer. This is a beer story, not a beer like I'm drinking, but the beer that can eat you. So this has been going around a little bit. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yeah. For the most
Let me make a
part.
little-
You mean the man dressed up like a bear?
Yes, exactly. So I'm making a little bigger. So
okay.
Everybody is like a buzz right now because I think this is in like China or something like this. There's these type of beers in Asia called sun beers, and apparently they're in the zoo and they can stand up just like humans. So people are now convinced that these bears are actually humans wearing like furry suits or something like that, so that they appear to be bears, but they're not. But I think they're real. I've watched a bunch of videos, and it just seems like that's the way that they present.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I had not heard about that.
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting to like see if those bears could survive here in the White Mountains.
This goes along with that video that I posted about the puppy with the 3 legs, and it's walking on its 2 hind legs. Have you seen this?
No.
It's absolutely amazing. It's on my Instagram. There, I'll send the link again. But there's a dog that is missing his front left paw or arm, and has learned how to walk on its 2 hind legs 100% of the time.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's really neat. But lately we've been talking about animals adapting and modifying their behaviors, and like the orcas attacking boats and things like that. It's just something might be going on here.
Yeah. The tide's turning.
The aliens are starting to that's right, I gotta ask Luke about aliens, but we'll get to that later. But
Definitely.
yeah, the aliens are starting to activate the animals to take
really
over for
funny.
us. All right, Stomp, I have an update on a story that we did. There was some bodies found in a remote campsite in Colorado. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and they had been there for probably over a year. They said that they were partially mummified. News came out last week that they identified the deceased people that they found. So it was 2 sisters in their early 40s, and one of the sisters had a son, 14-year-old son. So apparently they were living off grid, and they don't know the exact cause of death at this point. They said that there were signs of malnourishment, and that there was 2 people found in a tent and 1 outside. They theorized it could have been starvation, freezing temperatures, potentially carbon monoxide poisoning to try to make a fire to stay warm inside. But we'll keep an eye on that story. But the mystery is slowly unraveling on that one. But it's very strange that they would try to survive in such rough conditions like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Keep us posted. I mean, the tent makes sense. Poison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do hear stories sometimes of people like, there was that story in Maine about the guy that would like survive for 20 years as a hermit. But I do hear stories occasionally about people that are sort of hermits in the White Mountains. We haven't heard much lately, but it does make me think like it wouldn't be out of the question for someone to try to survive through the winter in the White somewhere.
Yeah. Don't doubt it at all. I mean, I've mentioned the places that I've stumbled across bushwhacking. I mean, they're out there all over the place.
Yeah.
People hide now.
Next up, Lynn had sent us over a link that I'll include in the show notes, Stomp, and this is it's a color-coded calendar that you can download that gives you the best times to visit U.S. national parks, and it basically breaks it down by the best time in each season to visit. So this is helpful because it can kind of give you the times to visit, like in the winter, like the Everglades National Park, Gateway Arch, Grand Canyon. Those are like earlier in the season. Hawaii, St. Thomas, and then you've got a lot that sort of fall in the middle of the summer. You've got Acadia actually is different because it's got like early summer and then into the fall months. But a lot of these are sort of Glacier National Park is in the middle of the summer, and Joshua Tree's in the spring and winter season. But I'll include this in the show notes, so if anybody's planning trips in the U.S. national parks, this is actually a pretty good guide. And I'm happy to see, because I'm going out to Yosemite, September is considered one of the best months to visit there. So,
What does it say for the whites?
It doesn't have the whites because the whites are a U.S. national forest and not a park.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't have that on there. But it has Yellowstone, Yosemite, Zion, Acadia, Arches, Bryce Canyon. So it has pretty much everything. So it's a good reference guide that I'll include in the show notes.
That's awesome.
Next up, this is a trigger warning for sexual assault, so just be wary if you don't want to hear this one. It's a little creepy, especially if you're a solo hiker, but there's been an incident, ongoing incidents in Colorado, Stomp. Sheriff's Office warns of a predator targeting female hikers in the Conifer and Evergreen area. So 7 reports have been taken so far going back to April 3rd. Investigators are indicating that a male suspect is basically hiking nude and assaulting hikers in the area. So again, they've had like 7 incidents with this guy. It sounds like he not only is he exposing himself, but he's also he's approaching women hikers. So a little scary. Luckily, we haven't had anything out here in the whites, but it's just a good reminder to just say that, like, things can happen sometimes. So be careful out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Crazy.
And if you're a solo male hiker, like, do whatever you can to sort of set people at ease. Don't be creepy.
It's going to be hard for you, Mike.
I'm always like, hi, how you doing? Like, nice day. I try to be as, like, friendly as possible.
I have a podcast.
Yeah, I have a podcast. So,
That's his famous line.
No, it isn't. Edit that out. And then next here, Stomp. So you pulled this one. Fires are threatening Joshua trees. So there's wildfires going on in Joshua Tree. Massive wildfire in the Mojave Desert. That's something we got to talk to Luke about too, is spotting for wildfires. We didn't talk about that.
That's true.
We didn't put that in the script, so. But yeah, it sounds like this fire is encroaching on the groves of the iconic Joshua trees. So experts are worried that the fire could decimate the trees, which normally survive over 150 years in the desert. So we'll keep an eye on this one too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
That's a beautiful place. I've seen that in person. Have you guys made it out to Joshua Tree?
Actually, yeah, I went out
So
there
pretty.
bouldering. There's a lot of good bouldering out there. Yep. It is neat.
Excellent.
Yeah, for sure. It's beautiful. Love the desert.
I do too.
It's so great.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been out to Sedona in that area, but I'd love to get out to check out Joshua Tree someday. But it's on the long list.
I was very surprised by Utah. I went out there to visit. My sister lives in Las Vegas, and we took a family vacation and headed up to Utah. I was very, very impressed with it.
Yeah. I've seen Salt Lake.
Yeah, not that part.
Not that. It's, yeah.
No, the
I
mountainous
feel that.
terrain, the elk, mule deer, trout fishery, just beautiful, very remote area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten much into Utah. We went in a little bit when we were over in like Glen Canyon Dam. We drove up into Utah, maybe like an hour or so into the desert area. But yeah, there's a lot of it looks very similar to Arizona, Sedona area. It's a little bit more rugged out there, but it's beautiful. Someday, so many places to go. Can't keep track.
Are you ready for Slasher's Gear Review?
All right, Stomp. So a little bit of gear talk here. So you wanted to do a summary on the Motorola Defy?
No, just an update, really.
Just an update, okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I have a unit in my possession now. It was sent over to me by a friend that's nearby, and I plan to fire this up. It looks really cool. If listeners remember, I talked about this Motorola device, which acts as a hotspot for your cell phone. So basically, if you're hiking in an area that's pretty remote or just has really poor communication, you can use your phone to communicate out via satellite. And it's really neat, Mike. Can you see this, Mike? It's about the size of a old school beeper. It's maybe 2 inches by 3 inches. Weighs maybe an ounce, if that. It's super light. I'm ready to fire it up, but I wanted to point listeners to a video about it by a YouTube channel called Hiking Guy. So he does a good 20-minute long review of the device. Again, I think the neatest thing about this is the subscription cost is like $5 a month versus some of the more expensive plans. So if anybody has one or gets one, let me know what they think. And we're looking for some feedback and possibly even for use in the search and rescue world too. We'll see. But it's definitely promising.
All right, so you're going to be testing this out yourself as well, right?
Yes. Yep. I just got it yesterday, so I'm going to fire it up soon.
Yeah, I was hiking with my group. This one of the hikers, Molly, had a similar device. It's from a different carrier. My friend Tom actually had the same model that she had. It's like green and gray, and the idea is basically like you're out of cell connection. You can connect with the satellite with that little device, and then send your text to your phone, and it'll hop over to your whoever you need to send it to. So
yeah, I'm not entirely clear. I think you have to have an app that you have to download, and I'm not sure if you can contact somebody that doesn't have the app or not. So that's a point that I need to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that the device that Molly had, it simply works over text message. So you connect to the device through your phone, and then it'll send a text message to whoever you want to send it to, and it comes into their phone via the text message app.
Okay.
Which I get, that's my guess is how that works too, but I'll check it out.
Alrighty.
And then just staying on Gear Talk Stomp, I wanted to give you a heads up that you had shamed me out of using hiking poles probably about 6 months ago, and it's probably one of the reasons why I got injured.
Oh, sure.
I've returned to using hiking poles now, especially going uphill.
Really?
And I've noticed like significant difference in my speed. I was absolutely cranking uphill.
Huh. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, if you're looking for speed.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit to not using the poles?
Well, from a PT perspective, we go into this in one of the episodes. From a PT perspective, you're utilizing your natural balance systems more. Now, think of it as like an elderly person relies upon a walker. It's a crutch. And the more you use things like that, you're not letting your body do its natural job. So there's a balance argument for sure. But I see what you're saying about the pace. Pace may be certainly better with the help of your arms pushing along too.
Yeah, and honestly, and I joke about it, but I had that toe injury and I was out for a couple of weeks, and a part of it was just sort of slipping. I feel like if I had my poles with me, I probably that incident wouldn't have happened. So that's my theory.
Kind of your fault.
It's the hypothesis, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically Stomp's fault that I got injured and I missed the Mount Washington race. But I started using my poles now, and I'm team pole at this point.
Team pole.
Team pole. The other thing is we can't use them for search and rescue. So if we're carrying somebody and your pole's sticking out of your pack, you'll gouge somebody's eye out.
Not good.
Yeah.
I did have this idea, so if anybody's listening, don't take this idea because I got to talk to Bryce from Vaucluse. But the other thing about hiking poles is I feel like, so we have this, Vaucluse gear, which is this basically this 3D printed thing. I feel like you could make a 3D printed device that would take your 2 hiking poles and allow you to convert it into a crutch. So if you had a little 3D printed device that could connect your 2 poles, make it into a crutch, you may be able to get out of a situation instead of getting a 911 call to get carried out. You might be able to crutch your way out. So it's another reason why I'm going to invent this, and I'm going to go on Shark Tank and make $1 million.
So you're saying that a connector would just make the 2 more supportive of heavier weight?
I think you could take a plastic overlay, put it on top, connect the 2 hiking poles, and then get a center section, connect the 2 hiking poles so it's stable, and then basically use that as a crutch.
You shouldn't give anybody this idea. Could make you famous. Definitely don't talk about it on a podcast.
We're trademarking this. This is trademark now. Don't steal it. So, anyway, but I like the hiking poles now, so I'm team hiking pole. And then the other thing, Stomp, that I'm dealing with is the big decision point for me is whether to take a tent or a hammock for my backpacking trip to Yosemite. So I'm testing out both systems, and right now I'm leaning towards a hammock.
I have no comment. I mean, I'm not too familiar with the terrain out there. Do you guys know? Any comment on that?
I love hammocks, though.
Yeah.
How many nights you spending in this hammock?
I think we're going to be out there for 4 nights.
Have you slept in it yet?
I have, yeah. I've done it. I've done 3 or 4 nights in the hammock, and then I've done tents for a bunch of times. So I think what I am going to do, though, Luke, is probably go out and do a couple of more nights and just test it out a little bit more. I just like the hammock. I feel like I'm more comfortable there.
Yeah, it's pretty popular. I was out last weekend with a friend of mine doing some fishing on the 3 Ponds Trail. There's a shelter out there, and he's a big hammock. I had my sleeping pad, and he had his hammock, and he loves the hammock. Just don't straighten up too low. His rubbed against a rock one time, and it split during the middle of the night, and he went right through the middle of it.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah, I got to make sure my hammock's new, though. I don't want it ripping. So, but we'll see. I'll keep people updated on what I decide to do. The funny thing is, the hammock's heavier than the tent, which you wouldn't think would be the case, but it is.
How about temperature, like warmth? Are you concerned about nighttime temps?
No, I have an underquilt and
Okay.
in a sleeping bag that'll keep me warm, so I'm not too worried about that.
Gotcha.
So, and then the last bit of gear thing I wanted to talk about here is every once in a while people ask us, like, what do they recommend? What do you recommend for a backpack, day pack, or whatever? I just have to keep giving a shout out to the Ultimate Direction Fast Pack that I picked up like 2 years ago. I've been using that thing. It's holding up pretty well. So if you're thinking about a backpack, I think I would highly recommend the Ultimate Direction for a day pack because it's got plenty of room for you to put all kinds of stuff in there, and it's served me pretty well.
That's the first time I've heard of that name.
What was the name?
Yeah. It's Ultimate Direction.
Ultimate Direction.
Yeah. And the reason I like it is because it's basically like it's like one of those running backpacks that you would see from like Solomon or whatever. It's got the shoulder straps where you can put your water bottles in, but it's actually bigger. It's 25 liters, so it's about the size of what you would find for a normal day pack. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to bring extra gear. Like sometimes if you're hiking with someone that doesn't want to carry all their gear, then it gives you a lot of flexibility.
Gotcha. I'll look into it for sure. I'm still happy with my ultralight. I converted one of those ultralight packs with the camelback. It was basically a camelback. Stripped it of everything and made some extra space, and I love it. It's great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Hey, what's that sound? It must be time for the pop culture segment with Mike and Stomp.
All right, Stomp. So, pop culture talk. Let's just do the Netflix movie because I feel like,
Sure.
Jamie, this is your moment here. So, do you like Hallmark movies?
I do not watch TV.
Yo, you don't watch any. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna sell you on a movie. So there's a movie on Netflix that Stomp will give you his password if you need it. It's called Happiness for Beginners. So it's all about this. I think it's a Hallmark movie. So it's basically like this lady that's like married, but the marriage goes south. She's trying to find herself, and like her brother's friend. I'm giving away the whole plot, but I'm sorry. It's just it's
Spoilers.
But the brother's friend like is in love with her, but like hasn't said anything, and for whatever reason, she decides she's going to go on this like backpacking trip. She's going to go find herself, right? She's going on the Appalachian Trail. She's going to find herself in like New York and Connecticut. Like who does the New York and Connecticut section of the Appalachian Trail find themselves? But so
True.
then the brother's friend who they've known forever, he happens to be on the trip too, and then calamity ensues, and then they fall in love. So
Well, there you go.
yeah.
So I don't have to watch it now.
Well, I guess you don't have to watch it. But Stomp, you were the one that recommended this to me. My sister-in-law messaged me. She was so excited, and then she was like, it was horrible. So,
Oh boy, that's funny.
Yeah.
The reason it caught my eye, I mean, the title was obvious. Like, oh, I should look into that. But the male lead looks like Emil Hirsch from Into the Wild. It looks like a literal doppelganger of that actor from that fantastic movie about that man that goes off grid. Have you seen that
I
one?
did see that movie, and that was wonderful.
Beautiful
Yeah, it was
movie.
beautifully done. The soundtrack's great, too.
Yeah, absolutely. But this actor looks just like him. But yeah, I'll give it a shot. I'll take one for the team.
it's 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. So not good.
Sold.
You can't always go by Rotten Tomatoes.
True. So I don't know what the audience rating is, but like the review rating is not great. And the sad thing is, like the lead actress is the Kimmy Schmidt. She's in The Office, the redheaded actress. So she's an excellent actress, but there was no chemistry between the two leads either. So.
Wow, that sounds like a great one, huh?
Yeah,
Can't
so
wait.
I highly
Call that a
recommend
soft
it.
sell.
Yes.
But the scenery was
recommend.
beautiful.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we have a sponsor here for the night, and this is Vaucluse Gear. Do you have a sweat problem? Sweat can be extremely uncomfortable on the trails, plus sweat is a serious risk factor. As your clothes get wet, your core temperature can dramatically fluctuate. This can result in hypothermia, heat exhaustion, and dehydration. we've got good news at SLASR for you. There's a piece of gear that solves the sweat problem. Vaucluse's ultralight ventilation backpack frame. The frame is a backpack accessory that easily installs in your favorite pack, sized 15 liters to 65 liters, and creates a ventilating airflow gap between you and your pack. It's also ultralight, weighing less than a pair of socks at just over 3 ounces. Whether you're hiking in hot or cold temps, the ultralight ventilation backpack frame is a real game changer when it comes to airflow and ventilation. So visit VaucluseGear.com to order an ultralight ventilation frame today. Use promo code SLASHER to enjoy a $5 discount. And plus, let them know that Mike and Stomp sent you. So there we go. You can still get stickers at Ski Fanatics right at the exit of 28 or at the Spinners Pizza Parlor in North Andover. Andover off of Dascombe Road, Route 93. If anybody's interested in advertising with SLASR, just send us a email at SLASRPodcast@gmail.com, and we can let you know how to do that. And just a quick little shout out for EMS, your Northeast go-to for outdoor gear, guidance, education, and more since 1967. Check them out at EMS.com. And finally, a little plug for Reckless, one of our favorite breweries in the area. Special thanks to at Reckless Brewing, where you'll enjoy the best food, craft beer, and fun just 15 minutes from Franconia Notch, many 4K footers, and less than 10 minutes from the Five Corners.
Yeah, Stomp, I did an experiment with my Vaucluse this weekend. I wore the T-shirt that Virgin Gear had given everybody for Emily's hike, and it's like half cotton.
Yeah,
so
I noticed that.
I'm gonna test to see how well the Vaucluse is on my back. So Luke and Jaime, this is like it's like a 3D printed like grid that attaches to your backpack, and it gives separation between your back and the backpack, so this airflow can go in between it, and actually works really well. So I hiked up Garfield, which is like a 5-mile hike uphill, in a cotton shirt, and then I took my backpack off, and I was asking people, like, is there any sweat? And I could feel, and I was actually pretty dry, so it does work really well. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's clever. It's super clever.
Yeah, good birthday present or Christmas present for your hiker friends.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for the donations this week. We have Cindy Hessian donated 5 coffees, and she's proud. She just caught up with all the episodes that we've ever done. Talk about binging.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is 116. So congrats, Cindy. And thank you again for that. And then Jeff donated 5 and is asking when the bushwhack is. And it's happening real soon. I was considering this weekend, but the weather's a little crazy. So just stay tuned on the Instagram story, and you'll get more information as we get closer to that.
Excellent. So beer talk, recent hike. Stomp, you drinking anything?
No, not tonight, my friend. I'm trying to play catch up on my hydration. What you got going on?
I have the last beer in my refrigerator. So from when I was off drinking for the last 3 months. So it's an Angelica from Lord Hobo Brewery.
Oh, the Hobo. That's not bad.
It's okay.
That's not bad stuff. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. So not drinking anything though.
Not tonight, no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And these two are sucking down some of our beautiful water from Welch Dickey.
Excellent.
It is good, though, isn't it?
It's delicious.
This water is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, whew.
Did you guys ever get any beer from Henniker Brewing Company up this way?
Not me.
I only bring it up. They do a dust-off beer. Dust-off being the call sign for Army Medevac. So they did a kind of like a tribute beer that they come out with. That's pretty good.
Oh, that's neat. We'll keep a lookout for sure. We have a couple of nice places around here that have great selection, so I'm sure.
Should have brought a gift pack.
Oh, next time you're in.
There you go.
We'll get you a gift pack. That sounds good though. So Stomp, recent hikes. So you already talked about you did Cannon. So how was that?
That was great. Yeah, piece of cake. I mean, again, it's just Kinsman Ridge Trail is just the gem of the whites, quote unquote. It's a joke. It's getting terrible, and all I could think about going up KRT was, this is prime location for a landslide with all the rain and everything else. Like, get me off this trail. There's no easy way up Cannon, and that trail, I don't know how they could redirect it, but It's in rough shape. Let's just put it that way.
Are you talking about the side closest to the parking lot, like that goes along the ski trails?
Correct. Yeah. So
it's all rugged out.
Yeah, it's really rough. Yeah. And beyond that, we did a family hike up Drake's Brook to Jennings, and then down Noon Peak, which is a nice little loop down here on Route 49 as you head towards Waterville. So that was a nice day. Beautiful weather. Yeah. And I'm still recovering from this sprain or strain in my calf. I have not been able to run for the last 2 weeks, which is a bummer.
Well, you'll have to rest up, Stomp.
Yeah,
you should start using hiking poles. It'll solve all your issues.
Way to bring it back. That was good.
Right. Damn, that was tough. I'll consider it.
Let's dive into some White Mountains history, shall we?
All right, so I did a couple of hikes. So I was out on Garfield, Stomp. A little quick history lesson on Garfield. I didn't know this. Garfield used to be called the Haystack. That was the original name up until the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. And in 1881, President Garfield was assassinated. So in recognition of and mourning of the assassination, the selectmen of Franconia voted to change the name of the Haystack to Mount Garfield in 1881, and then it was officially changed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of haystacks, like there's a little haystack on Franconia Ridge, and then there was the Haystack, which is now Garfield. So It's interesting how those names just kind of pop up everywhere.
Did you come across any info on that stone structure up top?
I haven't.
I wonder what that's all about. I've always been curious about that. I mean, you could assume it was maybe a fire tower or something, or a shelter. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then the other place I went, so the next day I took my nephew JT and his girlfriend Lily up Pleasant Mountain in Denmark, Maine, so right down the street from my father-in-law's place. And I'll tell people that right now is prime time blueberry picking season. There was probably like 50 people up there picking blueberries. But Pleasant Mountain is a fantastic hike if you're looking for something moderate. Great place to take the kids. Tons of blueberry picking. It's got a great fire tower up there. I actually had to peer pressure my so Lily, who was the girlfriend, she was like, "Oh, can I climb that?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can climb it." So she immediately got up and climbed it. Then I climbed it, but my nephew JT, I could tell that he didn't really want to climb it, but he felt peer pressured because his girlfriend did it. So he climbed up there, but you can't get inside the fire tower. You can only climb up, but it's probably like 30 feet tall. So it's one of the taller ones in the area.
I saw the pictures. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah.
A little risky.
It's got awesome views. And then Pleasant Mountain has an interesting story about its name too, Stomp, is previously it was known as Shawnee Peak. Okay. And the reason it was named Shawnee Peak in 1988 because a company from Pennsylvania, from the Poconos, actually purchased it as a ski resort, and they renamed it Shawnee Peak because they had another Shawnee Peak that was in the Poconos, I guess. So because they owned it privately, they were able to name the ski resort Shawnee Peak, but there's a separate section of a couple more additional summits, so the locals continue to call it Pleasant Mountain. Mm-hmm. The mountain's since been sold to the same organization that runs Sunday River, so they've now removed the name Shawnee Peak, and it's now back to officially Pleasant Mountain, which I like it a little bit better because there's no connection to the Shawnee tribe in the local region here. I think they were a tribe that was out west.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that, if that was a tribal name.
Yeah, I think originally they were like in the sort of Delaware area, but eventually they've settled in Oklahoma. So they did get pushed out during the settlement, but eventually they were in Oklahoma. So, but I thought that was interesting. I'm always curious about name changes.
Yeah, chock full of history tonight, Mike.
Sorry, I just was looking stuff up.
Sorry. No need to apologize.
All right. And then Luke and Jaime, where did you guys hike today?
Did the Welch Sticky Loop just down the road.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've done it before, but we figured it was probably a reasonable one to get knocked out between work and getting up here and then coming in for the podcast.
Yeah, it's perfect.
When did you start?
A little bit after 2.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that works. Well, how were the trails? Were they wet?
No.
Fairly dry?
There was a little bit of sprinkle when we left, but no, everything was pretty dry. Saw a few people, about 6 or 7 people on the trail.
That's great.
Always a varied group. You got runners coming up and down.
Oh, sure.
And then the people in sundresses and the whole gambit.
Yeah.
But everybody seemed to have a pretty good day. We were one of the last cars to leave the parking lot when we got back down. Mushrooms too. Lots of mushrooms out right now on the trails.
Yep.
Yeah.
We last weekend up at the 3 Ponds, we did a buddy of mine took a bunch of golden chanterelles off there, and we saw some oyster mushrooms out there today on the trees. I guess that's one plus side to all the rain that we've been having.
Right. Massive mushrooms. Are you familiar? Are you versed in which you can eat and not?
So, becoming versed, I'm interested in it, and there's always that gamble, right?
Oh, sure.
A little bit of gamble, and how confident are you? And I love that the apps, they don't guarantee anything.
Yeah.
And and just as you think you're pretty confident, that's definitely an edible mushroom. Then they remind you, plant the seed of doubt. Here's all the ones it looks like that it could be.
And then you just feed it to me first.
Yeah, well, so yeah.
See what
the
happens.
first time we did that, there was like a porcini type mushroom we actually found on our own property, and I cut a little bite. I was very, very conservative about the whole deal. Took a little sample off.
Sure.
I had read up, you try a little bit first, see how you feel. If everything's good, you can probably proceed. So I had one steak slice off the mushroom, and I cut a little piece off, and I'm explaining to her, well, let's just try a little bit now, and we'll wait and see how. She just grabbed the whole other half and boom, down the hatch. She said, I guess we'll find out pretty quick.
Yikes.
It was good. It was actually edible. So
delicious.
It worked out well.
Huh. I'm sure they taste better than store-bought.
They are. It is. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Huh. That's so great. So wait a minute. Just tell me about this app. So is it one of those identifying apps you can take a picture?
Yep. Yeah, they ask you to take a side profile, top, and a picture from underneath.
Yeah.
And then it kind of runs. You got to have service, so that's a bit of a downside. But you can take photos and store them, or take photos and then later on when you have service, upload.
Yeah.
Then get on there and check it out. But
Gotcha.
It works pretty. I think there's a couple different ones out there. I got the free one.
Okay.
And it works pretty well.
It reminds me, I just recently talked about this Merlin app, which identifies birds, and you have it as well?
Yes.
We tried it on this loop that we did this weekend up to Jennings, and it worked like a charm. Identifies it really well. No service. You don't need service. And then you can call them in, and sure enough, they always fly in. It's really an amazing app.
I thought what the neatest things was that if it has multiple birds, it'll show you the different birds, and then they re-highlight the bird that's chirping while you're actually actively listening to it, so you can kind of get better identify. Yeah, it really is pretty impressive.
Super cool app. Awesome.
Luke, is there any sort of general rule of thumb around the colors in mushrooms? If it's red, stay away from it, or is there nothing you can go by in general?
So I wouldn't say bright colors or anything that would warn you off, just in the sense of golden chanterelles, right? Bright orange, yellow color, just look a lot like the jack-o'-lanterns, which are not edible. Big dead giveaway of the jack-o'-lanterns is that they are bioluminescent. So if you put them in a dark space and flip them over, you can see some glowing. So that tell you that don't eat them. But no, I mean, I guess so. Again, I'm pretty novice at this, so disclaimer: I wouldn't go off anything that I say on the podcast. But so far, every you see a lot of those red mushrooms that have almost dots on them, kind of look like Super Mario Brother mushrooms. And every time I've looked up any of those, they've all been toxic.
The Amanita muscaria. Yeah, that's if you want to go for a journey, you want to eat one of those. That's a journey mushroom.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So yeah,
interesting.
Or as we say, inedible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
But but it is. There are some easy mushrooms. Hen of the woods and chicken of the woods are two. They really can't be confused with anything else, and they are probably two of the tastier mushrooms out there.
Wow.
Well, I'll try to find some pictures of those and throw them up in the show notes.
Yeah.
Actually, I picked the wrong one. Whoops.
Sorry. Again, disclaimer.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we have one more before your segment here, guys. So this is a sponsor, Seek the Peak. So Seek the Peak returns this summer with the classic Mount Washington Hike-a-thon. This annual gathering of the New Hampshire's hiking community is the nonprofit Mount Washington Observatory's largest annual fundraiser. Hikers raise funds, earn gear, and celebrate at our après hike party with live music, food trucks, epic gear raffle, bear garden, vendors, and people who care deeply about the trails and an inclusive hiking community. It all takes place at the base of the Mount Washington Auto Road. Our Hike and Make Friends option supports all ability levels, pairing hikers with similar goals for a trek that's right for you. All hikers are welcome to help raise funds for the observatory's summit weather station and services like the twice-a-day Higher Summits forecast, educational programs, and research in the White Mountains. Seek the Peak is sponsored by Great Glen Trails and Eastern Mountain Sports. So to learn more and register for next year, check out seekthepeak.org.
Very good, Stomp. Do you want to do notable listeners, or you want to wait till next week?
If you guys don't mind, can we zip through them?
Sure.
You guys, the babysitter's still good?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just going to bill you guys by the hour. That's right. You guys are picking up the tab when we go over, right?
That's fair.
They both give me the thumbs up. Check.
Stomp will take care of
Copy
you.
that. We're good. Let's fly. All right. All right. We have Brady Girl 1, Icelandic Highlands. That's pretty cool. Liz Fay was camping at White Ledge Campground, exploring Redstone Quarry, Mount Chicora via the Piper, Liberty, Hammond, and Weedamoo Loop. Bella Pelzar Adventures tackled Mount Webster. Dr. Nancy Q did Bond Cliff, Bond, West Bond, and the Twin Traverse. Shandy Does It All tackled Glen Ellis Falls, Wiley Pond, and then another trip tackled the Moats as well. Kinesthetically, a Werewolf tagged us for Parker, and then tackled Cannon as well for 13 out of 48, which is pretty neat. Just Ben's 22 out of 48. Tom Field, Avalon, Dad Adventure. A-Bomb_Graham tackled 10 out of 12 for the 52 of the View, and that was Crawford, Resolution, and Parker. And actually suffered an ankle injury, which is sort of a bummer. So he had to hobble out 5 to 6 miles from the trailhead. Pretty neat story, though. So self-extraction, I mean, we talk about that, just being ready for the worst. And if you can self-extract, do so. Obviously, there's limits to that, but I'm glad you made it out there. Reese Adventures was on a 3-day backpack, including Emily's hike to Mount Hale. That's a hell of a weekend. Dave Shits in the Woods did Mount August, Mount Mexico, and Big Rock Cave. I'm familiar with Paugus, but I'm not familiar with those other two. Have you done those?
It's just the approach from, I forget the road, but it's just the approach to Paugus. It's basically like a loop trail where you go up there. Yeah, that's the way to go, honestly. Like it's there's a cave system, and then you go up through Mount Mexico. So it's a nice hike.
The pictures are beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Then 2 more here. So Wild and Outdoors did a 15-mile traverse loop, including the Bald Faces, Eastman, Meter, and Eagle Crag. That sounds like a hell of a trip. And finally, A. Folsom tagged us today and just went up Mount Eisenhower via the Edmonds Path. Pretty cool. Any notables? Any winners, Mike?
I like the Iceland in the beginning. That's my favorite.
Yeah, Mike, you talked about Iceland a long time ago. You should revisit that sometime or another. That's a good story.
Yeah, it's a fun place to go. So I'll, matter of fact, I'll post I put a video together of the hikes I did when I was out there. So it's a great place. So I'll link that in the show notes.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's time for Slasher's Guest of the Week. Very cool. Very cool. Very, 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 very cool.
segment of the week here. So, Luke and Jaime, this is your big moment. Are you ready?
Ready.
Excellent. So, Stomp, why don't you sort of give the background on how we got connected, and then I can start peppering them with questions.
It sounds great. So this was a connection from our dear friend Ty Gagney, and Ty, as he was researching some of his books, obviously got to know many of the crew. I'm assuming from Air National Guard here in New Hampshire.
Ooh,
and
time out.
What?
That's a big.
Oh.
So that happens so often.
New Hampshire?
No, you miscredit the Air Guard is the Air Force, Air National Guard here in New Hampshire.
Oh, see, this is
they
it.
often, that often gets misidentified. The Army National Guard is the helicopters.
Gotcha.
Just, almost as bad as the name.
I think I did that earlier, so we're going to have to edit that song.
Oh, yeah.
It's an easy mistake to happen.
It's a good clarification, though, for sure. So that's it. Short and sweet. Ty was the one that sent you our way, and we really appreciate you offering to come in and chatting with us.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity.
This is going to be really a great chat.
Great. So, Luke, why don't we start off? Could you give a little bit of sort of background about where did you grow up? And can you talk a little bit about, like, we're always interested in sort of like your exposure to outdoor activities and anything to do with hiking or fishing or anything like that?
Sure. So I was born in New Hampshire, Nashua, New Hampshire. I grew up in Windham with my grandparents and my mother and my sisters. And my grandfather was a hunter. He taught me to hunt when I was young, primarily deer hunting. My father was a fly fisherman, so I spent a lot of time fly fishing with him in the outdoors. And I actually got involved with a church group. We had the church that I attended when I was growing up had Dana Lemieux was a guy that worked for AMC, and he worked up at the huts. So and there were some other avid hikers. So they got a group together and organized, and we used to do sections of the AT starting in Maine and do a couple overnight hikes every summer. And I had the opportunity to tag along with Dana and help out at the huts, kind of like a dishwasher, helping him out, just volunteering. And that was kind of neat for a 14, 15-year-old kid to do that in the summers. And then as I got into high school, I got through indoor rock gyms, got into some rock climbing, kind of transitioned to some outdoor climbing. And then in college, as I ran up a tuition bill and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, there was a guy in my class. He was in a mountain infantry unit in the New Hampshire Army National Guard, and he kind of chatted with me. He's like, well, they have a student loan repayment program and a tuition waiver, yada, yada. And this was August of 2001. And he said, I looked into it, and it was a mountain infantry unit, which to me made sense at the time. I was like, sure, I like being in the mountains. I like climbing in the mountains. I'll do a unit that spends time out in the woods in the mountains. Sounds like a good deal. And, I can take advantage of some of the school benefits, the GI Bill stuff. And so I joined on August 23rd, 2001, which was a couple of weeks before 9/11.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually at the Manchester Armory on 9/11, picking up my initial issue of Boots and Gear when the tragedy happened. And so that was, a bit of a game changer. It changed kind of the role of the National Guard going forward, more of an operational unit force than a strategic one. But so deployed with Mountain Company to Iraq in 2004 to 2005. Came back and was ready, went back to UNH to finish up my degree, which was in journalism. So I finished the 5 years of the Mountain Company and was getting ready to get out, and had the opportunity to go into a public affairs detachment as a print journalist photographer for the Army National Guard to kind of get some experience that I was hoping to, tie in with my degree from UNH. And that opportunity led to a full-time opportunity working for the National Guard, New Hampshire National Guard. And I did that for a while and deployed again to Iraq with the Public Affairs Detachment. And I came home about 10 years into my service and was really thinking about just getting out or staying in for the full 20, for retirement. And my boss at the time kind of put me on the path to aviation, said, well, if you were going to, to stay in, what would you want to do? And I said, well, the only thing I ever wanted to really do was fly. and found out there was a path to do that. And I met my wife when I got back from the 2010 deployment. So it was kind of a big year. I met her and said, at the time she said she wasn't too into dating anyone at the time. And I was like, well, that's great because I'm planning on going to Fort Rucker for flight school for 2 years. So let's just hang out for a few months until I leave. And a few months.
See, that's the move. That's the move right there.
Drop the flight school.
I'm not that into you either.
And then, that few months have turned into, coming up on 13 years in October. And we went to Fort Rucker together, flight school for a couple of years. I came home and deployed to Afghanistan as a pilot, medevac pilot with the Charlie Company 3rd, the 238th. And we got back from that in 2014. And I was a traditional guard. We may probably talk about that a bit later, but I was a traditional, what we call an M-Day guard soldier. So I had a full-time job outside of the Army, 40-hour-a-week job, and then I would come in and fly in the evenings during the week to maintain my proficiency and my skill. And we have certain requirements we have to do, so you got to come in and fly during the week to do that, and then on the weekends, and then other training events, and then when state missions come up, if you're available to do that, to go out for the search and rescue stuff. And after 4 years of doing that, I had the opportunity to apply for a full-time position at the Aviation Support Facility, the Army Aviation Support Facility in Concord, New Hampshire, and that is where I work now as an instructor pilot and a Aviation Safety Officer.
Wow. When you go to flight school, do they just send you on sort of a generalist path, or do you pretty quickly get funneled into, like, you're going to be flying this type of craft, or you're going to be doing helicopters over airplanes? Like, how does that work?
Well, there's going to be two approaches. If you're going down there for National Guard, you're going to go down, like in New Hampshire, if we send someone on to flight school, it's already known that you're going to go through to be a Blackhawk pilot right now. That's what we have. We have two different flavors of Blackhawks, and you may do one or the other while you're down there. On the active duty side, they recruit into it, and there's initial phases of training where everyone's flying the same. It's a Bell, well, it used to be. When I went through, it was a Bell 206 Ranger. Now it's what they call the Lakota. It's an Airbus helicopter, but it's a smaller helicopter, and you learn all your fundamental training on that. And then depending on how you do on test and your performance and other merits, they rank you from 1 to 50 or however many students there are. And when everyone completes the common training, they then have selection day where for the active guys who don't know what they're going to get, number one, we have here, pick your pick. Here's the opportunities. And as soon as he picks Apaches, that's off the list. And number two gets to pick based on the remaining aircraft slots. And that's kind of how they do it. So the better you do in the first part of this training, the better odds of picking the aircraft that you want to fly when it comes to helicopters for the Army.
Interesting.
When you got in versus now, do you if we have young people that listen to this podcast that are sort of trying to figure out, like, I even think about my own nephew, like he was talking to me when we were hiking about, like, maybe I'll think about the military. I don't really know what I want to do. If somebody did want to get into aviation at this point, has it changed a lot, the approach from when you went in 10, 20 years ago? Or do you have any sort of general advice for young people that might be looking to get into it?
I think now is a great time because, I think we're in the same situation that most industries are in right now, where there's a lot of people retiring and we have a lot of vacancies. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity. Like I tell other people that are in the Army Guard now, is like, if you ever thought about being a pilot, now is a great time to put in your packet and apply for that process. It's you fill out, you have to take some tests. There's in addition to the normal military aptitude test that most people take, you have to take a flight aptitude test. They call it the SIFT, and that can be arranged to take. And if anyone out there is interested that's listening, you can just reach out to a New Hampshire Army National Guard recruiter, and they can point you in the direction of CW3 Mike Fletcher, who kind of is the point of contact for the application process. But you get that together. There's a medical piece. You got to get a medical done, a physical done, make sure you're fit for flight duty. And once you get all that stuff together, there's an interview process where you'll interview in front of a board of aviators who will ask you a few questions, and then they interview all the candidates, and then they rank them we get 2 slots a year to send people to flight school.
Wow.
So we'll pick 2 and send them.
Wow. And how much mechanical knowledge do you pick up in flight school, or is that an expected part of your job where you've got to be able to sort of walk around the craft and identify potential mechanical issues?
Oh, it's a big part of it for sure. And as somebody, I actually didn't have an aviation background when I went in, so I knew nothing about helicopters when I went to flight school. I mean, all the other criteria I had met, but and there's people down there that have already flown, when you get to flight school in the civilian sector. So, but there's you take knowledge, classes and exams on systems, on hydraulics, electrical systems, fuel systems, the engines, all of it. So you get a pretty good, thorough working knowledge of the aircraft, and a lot of that is to help you understand the aircraft and how it works in case an emergency. Understanding the systems and how they're working, so you can better make decisions on safely landing the aircraft. So it's important to really know the machine that you're working with and the capabilities and the limitations of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then your current role right now is Instructor Pilot and Aviation Safety Officer. Okay, so can you describe a little bit about what exactly your day-to-day duties are for that?
Sure. So the reason the full-time staff exists and the Army Aviation Support Facility exists is because our units, which is the Medevac Company, Charlie Company, and then Able Company. So the Medevac Company is 6 helicopters, 6 HH-60 Mikes, which are relatively new, within 2018, 19, 20. Beautiful aircraft, digital cockpit, all digital displays. They have flight director, they have coupling, you can tell what altitude and airspeed to fly, and the helicopter will do it for you with the push of a button. And then we have the CAC, the Able Company, which has 4 helicopters, and those are the Limas. So they're more the traditional steam gauges that people think about when they see a cockpit, a console. And they don't have that automated function. That's hand flying. And both are equipped with hoist. Both can do the mission. But all those units, the pilots have to meet the same flying hour requirements as an active duty guy that gets paid full time on active duty to do it. And these guys have 9-to-5 jobs, and all those aircraft are maintenance intensive. So in order to support what we call the traditional guard force, you need to have a full time group of people that have mechanics available to work on the aircraft when they're done being flown. They have a lot of there's a couple hours of maintenance can be tied to one flight period. And then on the skill side of the set, we have guys that are being trained. They're out of flight school. They're brand new, so they need to be trained up on how to do our specific. You learn the fundamentals in flight school. Now you come to New Hampshire, and as people that hike up here, it's the same thing with the flying. It's a very unique environment in the White Mountains when it comes to flying due to the weather.
Say that again.
So guys get up here, so we got to teach them. This isn't like flying in Alabama, where you've been for the last year and a half, and then you don't do hoist work in Alabama. You don't do mountain approaches. You don't land to these places that we have to do up here. So that's ours established training program to get people up to speed, and you do that with an instructor pilot. And we have and then we have evaluations we have to do. We need an instructor pilot to do annual evaluations, like any pilot, like an airline pilot, an Army pilot. You have to do annual evaluations to make sure you're proficient and still capable of doing your job. And then like I said, and then just sometimes it's just a matter of going out, and you're not necessarily training someone to do a new task. You're not evaluating a task. You're just flying for proficiency. It's a perishable skill, especially the night vision goggle piece of it. That's important to get out and do.
I just had a quick question about the digital console versus the old analog. Do you have any preference, or are there quirks one to the other?
So
the old one's so much cooler.
I bet.
So there you go.
I'm just wondering, any glitches?
So I think it's tough. It's this is the first aircraft that I flew. So I think when we got the Mike models, which were newer, I think everyone was partial to the older ones.
Yeah.
The biggest, so the situational awareness in the digital cockpit is hard to beat.
I can imagine.
And the biggest thing for what we do with search and rescue is we are able to. So the biggest thing used to be with Lima's, daytime searches are harder than the night searches for us when the people are found, right?
Sure.
So you get even So you mentioned earlier, I think it might have been on the previous podcast, you guys were talking about the 911 calls and the triangulation, what they have now. So we've been that's been an advantage for us as well, because now we can be provided a grid that's fairly accurate. Not that long ago, and still sometimes if someone doesn't get a 911 call off, even when they're found, it's like we're on the east side of Mount Madison, somewhere, or on the backside of Jefferson. So you're out there and you're trying to look down through the trees and try to find these people. And again, we have no maps, like digital maps, like you can pull out we used to take paper hiking maps with us, and that's what we're looking at, a paper hiking map in the helicopter, looking down on the mountain, and some of those trails in the woodline are kind of hard to follow.
I've seen you guys do that. On my one flight with you guys, that's what I saw, like the old paper map. Hey, where's Gio? Oh, it's over there. Like, just check the map.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which peak is this?
That's great.
And now we have these, the hiking maps are uploaded digitally to our digital maps, and we have an icon that shows us who we are. And now when someone says start at Kinsman and come down the Kinsman Trail from Kinsman Pond on your way down, we're below Kinsman Pond. Now we can fly right to the pond on the map. We'd see it, and we can put ourselves over the trail on the way down. So it's been, for daytime rescues, it's been a huge help. The only limitation between the two aircraft is that the new one that we have, the HH, is heavier than the Lima, and so as a result, there are some factors when it comes down to fuel. Like, obviously fuel is an issue when we're up in the whites. We want to make sure we have enough fuel to conduct a mission, get the person to where they need to go, whether it's an ambulance transfer in the Cannon Mountain parking lot, Gorham airstrip, or if we're, taking them north to the hospital, or taking them to Littleton, or all the way up to Dartmouth and Lebanon. So we got to factor in, where we're going to be taking this person, how much fuel do I have, how much time do I have on station. So the heavier aircraft takes more gas to burn, kind of narrows, squeezes that window a little bit. Power requirements, it's not too bad for where we operate here in the Northeast, where we have less power available just because of the heavier aircraft, but it's not in the environment that we're currently operating. It's still not too much of a concern. We're aware of it, but we're pretty comfortable in how much power we have available to do a hoist mission, even, off the top of Tuckerman's or something.
Wow.
Well, I want to get more into the missions, but before we do that, Jaime, we want to hear a little bit about your background. So we heard a little bit. So he played it cool in the beginning when you guys first met. But what is your background? And, are you a hiker, outdoors person? Can you talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I was born in Mass, but grew up mostly in New Hampshire. And I went to Salt Lake City for college, and seeing Utah, such a beautiful place, made me want to travel. I was so taken back by how beautiful just our country was. I wanted to see even more. So I did a lot of backpacking after that, and mostly Europe, Scandinavia, Central Asia, Western China, went through Tibet and Nepal, and did some cool hikes there, which was pretty amazing. And came back here and thought I was just going to travel the world forever, and till I met this guy.
Because in Alabama.
Yeah. I ended up in Alabama. Yeah, which was actually really beautiful.
It was a year and a half honeymoon. It was great.
I was taken back by how amazing Alabama was. Actually, it was a cool place.
And then what were you doing while he was in flight school?
I had our first child. I had our daughter Rose, and I was staying home with her. I was taking some dance classes and just walking a lot and meeting all the other military wives, which was a lot of support on post, which was really neat to see.
I can imagine. And then eventually you both made your way back up to New Hampshire. Then.
Yeah. Came up here and bought a place in Pittsfield, New Hampshire, so we could be close to where he was working.
Excellent. And then from your perspective, what was it like watching him go through flight school? Was it stressful obviously you got newborns and things like that, so it's going to be stressful no matter what, but was it a lot of activities and alone time, I would assume, when he's off training? Yeah,
definitely. So the memorization he had to go through and the amount he had to focus was unreal. There was, we had to be very quiet and with a baby, that's very tricky. And I was very impressed with how diligent he was and how rigorous the program was and what it required of him. And it's really impressive how much information they pack in their brains in that short period of time. And Fort Rucker is a really remarkable place. There's helicopters constantly around flying, and it's neat to see the Army training these guys up. And it was neat to see a good experience.
Do they do family events, like take your family up on a helicopter day or anything like that?
No, it took me 11 years to finally get myself into a helicopter.
Really?
Yeah. And I can't go in the same helicopter as him because, granted, he's going to showboat, then something might go wrong, and then kids left without parents. Yeah. So I did get my first flight about a year ago. And
do you remember who flew you?
It was Hamilton, I think. Yeah. It was so gorgeous. I mean, just to be able to have that bird's eye view looking down, and I felt like a kid in a car seat, though. You're strapped in and you just want to move more, but you're strapped in so tight to your seat. You just wanted to move around and see. But it took me a while to get in there. But once I got in there, it was a very, very cool experience.
Wow, 11 years. So you finally got your flight. Now, you're probably in the middle of it, like the kids are sort of in that activity where they're doing sports and activities and all that fun stuff. Do you guys, obviously you got the date night tonight, but do you get to get out on your own and do any sort of outdoor activities with or without the kids, or is it mostly just focused on kids' activities right now?
No, we try and get out as much as we can together as a family. We do. We're with 4-H, so we do a winter hike challenge with them. So I really like winter hiking. We keep it pretty minimal. Our youngest is 7 right now, so nothing crazy. But we'll throw on some spikes and hit some trails that way. And Luke does tons of fishing with the kids, and he's teaching them how to shoot now too, and a lot of ice fishing too. A lot of winter activities as a family. So that's great. And then we get out when we can together, but it's rare. Yeah. These date nights are rare. But.
So a friend of mine gave me good advice once that, when you have kids, if you want to go back to doing the things that you love to do, you really got your kids to get them into it. So now that it becomes, gives you the opportunity to do it, because the kids always come, first. So we've got them into it, and we have some smaller hikes down in our area too, Mount Major, stuff like that, Gunstock down there that we can do by the lake, which have pretty good views and stuff. So you got to keep it short. You want to make sure the kids stay into it though. So if you make it this grueling experience, they're not going to want to do it again.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. That's the tricky part.
It really is.
I've got 3 and I've got one that's stuck with it, and the other 2, I think I pushed too hard and they're not into it. So it is a tricky balance, but you've got the right idea, Luke, is to just keep it slow and keep it fun and short with them.
Yeah.
So, Luke, I did want to talk a little bit about like the actual helicopters that you're flying. I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you give some stats around the Blackhawk? Like, how big are these things? How fast can they go? And how much time in the air can you actually fly one of these when you're on a mission?
Sure. So, for anyone that's not familiar, hasn't been around them, the rotor system, the main rotor system up top, right? So when that thing's spinning, it's from tip to tip, you're probably looking about roughly 55 feet. So that's 55 feet across. And from the front tip of the aircraft, the rotor system, to the tail tip, you're looking about 65 feet. Mm-hmm. So, which is why we, finding a place to land, if it's a pinnacle or a ridge line, it's cleared out with trees above the tree line, there's a pretty good chance that we can land 1-2 wheels to pick somebody up. But if it's in a forested area, like, we're not landing that anywhere, which is why we're going to have to do a hoist operation. So that being said, that's about how big it is. So weight-wise, I said we got kind of 2 different flavors, the Limas and the Mikes. The Lima, as you want to call it, the old school one with the steam gauges. Typically, when we take off with a crew of 4 and a full tank of gas, you're probably looking around 15,000 pounds. The newer ones, we're probably looking closer to 17,500 pounds with a full tank of gas. So it's still, I've been doing this for a little bit over a decade now, and it's still it's still amazing to watch and think that just wind, a rotor, just a big giant fan is lifting up 17,000 pounds, right? And then as far as the airspeed goes, so the published for the Army, the published max speed, is 193 knots, which in miles per hour equates to about 222. That can be subjective, depending on what altitude you're at, and depending on the tailwind, you could be doing a little bit faster than what the aircraft is indicating. We typically have to take in a few different considerations. We generally travel around 120 knots or 130, 132 miles an hour, and that's for a few different reasons. One is, we want to maximize our fuel, right? So if we take off from Concord and we're going up to the Whites to do a mission, you want to make sure you have as much fuel as possible for time on station. So if we take off as fast, and especially if it's unknown, right? If we're not exactly sure what the situation is or exactly where someone is, or if this is just they haven't found them yet, and it's just helping assist in a search, time on station you want to maximize. So based on a few different factors, the aircraft, it's better off to fly a little bit slower and take a little bit, and you'll get there maybe a couple minutes later, but you'll have more fuel while you're on station, and that'd be a better situation than having to stop what you're doing to go get gas and come back and spend all that time. So, we're generally flying around 130 miles an hour. So that's about weight. As far as onboard, so, if we, the Lima has more seating, if we had to take up, you can fit with all the seats in the back, you put 10 people in the back with a crew of 4. The HH-60, the medevac bird, has 4 litter pans in the front, and then the 2 crew chief seats, and then there's a couple, 3 seats on the back wall. So if you had to move passengers, you can lower down those litter pans and put 3 drop-down seats on each side to add another 6 seats for passengers. But it's not really built for moving people. Mm-hmm. It's built for, obviously it's mission of medevac.
Wow.
With the flight crew, so you said there's 4 people. What are the typical roles that the flight crew does, or how is it broken down? Sure.
For a medevac bird, we typically you have a pilot in command, and you have a pilot or co-pilot, if you want to call them that. And in the back, you have a crew chief and a medic. The crew chief, it will be the hoist operator. He'll operate. He gets trained to do that, and then the medic will ride the hoist cable down so that they can provide any, triage. If there's more than one person injured, they can triage who needs to come up first, and if they can kind of evaluate the injury as best they can. They'll get it's always amazing. I would say many of the times that we get called in to do support, it seems like there's always an off-duty nurse or doctor bystander that happens to be there that's already helping out quite a bit and has a pretty good handle on what's going on or from their perspective. So that can kind of inform the medic. So in addition to riding the hoist, packaging the patient, calling, and then, he evaluates, am I going to take this person up on a jungle penetrator, or are we going to have to call for a basket? And, that's, where their training come in. We have, our medics are well-trained. A lot of them most of them are full-time paramedics. If they're not working for working for us full-time, actually they all right now are traditional guard guys, and they're all, like I said, they work in, some guys fly on mid-flight civilian, some guys work for fire departments, some guys work for hospitals as paramedics, and so they're pretty capable guys. And so part of the process where they bring to the crew is helping to help the pilot in command, who the pilot in command is the more experienced typically of the 2 pilots, and he's got the final decision on pretty much everything. So if any mistakes are made, that's going to fall back to him, and he makes the final call on what we do and where we go. So the medic can help inform the pilot in command. We got to get this guy to Dartmouth in Lebanon. We can't waste time. If we bring him over to Littleton, they're just going to stabilize him and wait for Dart to come get him and bring him there, so we can save this guy some time and just fly straight there and bring him up to Lebanon anyway.
Gotcha.
And then the crew chief is, again, operating as an air crew member in the aircraft, helping us to land. Those guys help us when we, as pilots, go to land on a tricky spot. A lot of times we can't see the entire aircraft behind us. It's too big, right? So you have some spatial sense of where everything is, but in the end, you guys know what it's like up there. You're trying, there's a lot of ledges and cairns and drop-offs that could damage the belly of the aircraft or the tail boom. So those guys are hanging out the window, helping clear the tail and the underbelly of the aircraft to make sure we don't bang it up when we land on the top pinnacles and stuff. And so in addition, and then they help us, with airspace surveillance and whatnot. And then the pilot in command is typically off the controls during the mission and is kind of he manages everything going on. Sometimes if it's a little bit trickier, maybe on experience level, he might take the controls if there's something challenging that maybe the pilot on the other seats, feels more comfortable. They got the guys in a better position to do it. We'll do that. But generally the pilot in the right seat is the guy on the controls during the operation, especially the hoisting piece.
When you get called for a mission, I'm assuming there's like different definitions for mission types. Like clearly, like there's scenarios like we're going to talk about a mission that happened on Lafayette where it was a known patient that had to be extracted. So you're not going up there to do like a long search or anything. It's like, okay, I'm just going to pick this person up and we know the coordinates. But I'm assuming there's also scenarios where you've got to search for somebody. You kind of know where they are, but you have to do a little bit of a search. And then there's mission types where you have no idea where the person is and you're doing visual searches. So can you talk a little bit about like how do you get notified of missions, and then how do you define those mission types?
Sure. So the notification goes out. Fish and Game will usually be the point of contact. They reach out to us through Colonel Mattimore. They give them a heads up and say we're going to be requesting the support of a helicopter. And then at that point, we don't have 24/7 medevac standby. So like when we go overseas as a deployment setting, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, or even just support. We had units that go over to Kosovo. Sometimes we do humanitarian missions down to Guatemala where we do medevac standby. And in that case, we have crews that you're prepared. It's a 15-minute wheels up. The call comes in for again, like you said, there's different standards at the call, right? An urgent 9-line medevac drops in an overseas environment. You have a crew that is there 24/7 standing by, ready to go. And that call drops in within 15 minutes. They're wheels up and on their way. In New Hampshire, we don't have that 24/7 standby. So the call comes to Colonel Mattimore and he immediately starts calling to find out who's available, who's in state, who's nearby. So I'd say our general response time, that's why a lot of the full-time guys get tagged because we live close by. We have M-Day guys, traditional guard guys that live further away. So, the flight operations contact gets notified, and this, one of the full-time pilots will start figuring out who's available for the front seaters for the pilots, and then some of our back seater full-time people will start we'll start reaching out, finding out who's available for the crew chiefs and the medics. And we have to quickly via phone text figure out who's taking the mission and who's, makes sense to get there. And again, we have rules like, there's no drinking 12, it's the 12 hours bottle to throttle, right? So case in point, more recently, last weekend on Sunday, I'll use that as an example. Fish and Game reaches out around 7:30 p.m. saying we need the support of a helicopter. Mattimore, we'll start going before we get the details. We'll start rolling out, hey, who's available? And, 7:30 on a Sunday night, you got to find somebody that hasn't had a beer or a glass of wine with dinner, and that can be challenging. But we had guys available. If it's a known weekend that we get a lot, you have the holiday weekends where there's a lot of climbers, we'll kind of identify crews. They're not in a paid status to be on standby. We'll be like, hey, we'll just shorten the call response list. Who's around this weekend? It's 4th of July weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Who's available for a mission if one comes down? Because they typically will. And those guys will usually kind of make sure they're available and haven't been drinking and are ready to go if they get a call. And then, you're looking at from Fish and Game calling to wheels up, maybe depending on how close the people are, what time of day, an hour and a half to get wheels up. So, and then from, getting the call, the crew gets there. Usually by the time you show up in Concord, the picture's developed from Fish and Game about what the situation is. Like you said, Mike, do we know where they are? Do we know, is this, sometimes depending on the injury, we'll know right away that this is going to be a basket lift. We go prepared to do any of it, because sometimes unknown condition, right? You see a lot of leg injuries, stuff like that. That's going to be a basket, so we'll get the call. We show up at the flight facility and we start looking at weather as the pilots. The crew chief will go down and start looking at the logbook, the aircraft, making sure it's ready to get pulled out. The medic starts gathering all the gear together that we have staged in a room for our state response. There's always identified the helicopter that's going out on a mission. Here's the gear. It's, the more structured, it's a process that we rehearse and do over and over. So everybody disperses and does their role. The pilot in command is going through the paperwork for the mission briefing and approval process, understanding what the weather is, what the risk is. He gets briefed appropriately while the pilot is doing some mission planning, the other pilot. And then they all come together as a crew brief, touch base with Fish and Game. Sometimes Fish and Game has an officer available to hop in the aircraft with us. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes we're trying to reach them on the radio on the way up.
When it comes down to weather, do you ever take into consideration, okay, the forecast looks terrible, but bird's eye view on the ground, like, will you respond if somebody at command says, well, we see blue sky? Will you go by anything on the ground, or is it strictly a forecast that you rely upon?
So it's an informed, right? You're pulling from different assets. It's an informed decision. So
gotcha.
Life, limb. So we're typically, if we're getting a call, it's going to be usually life, limb, or eyesight of some kind. So there is a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
So there will be, the weather. I mean, I have not had the weather to say I'm not going to go so far. So we've had less than ideal weather. And I think, again, at that point, you look at the experience level of the crew and the colonel or the mission approval officer, and you make a plan. You say, hey, it's an ongoing risk mitigation process.
Yeah.
So right now, hey, sir, this is what the weather is at Concord. This is what, and we all know the weather in the Whites are, you don't get great. I mean, you have the Mount Washington Weather Observatory, but that doesn't mean it's going to be, that's up, it could be a lot different, down here at Dickie Welsh.
Yeah, sure.
So, you do the best guess. You look at some civilian weather reporting, say, hey, sir, here's what the weather's at Concord. Here's what the weather is at Laconia. Here's what it is up Mount Washington. And this is my plan. We're going to go to here. We'll make a weather call at this place. We're going to launch. We're going to go. And we had an aircraft that, they got all the way up there, and they were in the clouds, right? They came, they approached, and it was just in the clouds. There's nothing we can do at that point. But they flew up there to make sure, like, we'll go until it's, we'll fly, and then until we can't, and if you have to make the weather call, usually the weather calls are made en route. They're usually made in the air, not on the ground. I mean, even unless it's like truly a blizzard or nor'easter, like there's just no way you're going to go, right?
Right.
So, I mean, there are even wind limitations on being able to start the aircraft. 45 knots. If the wind exceeds 45 knots on the ramp, you're not technically supposed to start the aircraft or start it. Shut it down because it could damage it. But so, I mean, with the wind, with weather being absolutely a no-go. And I mean, Ian Hamilton, one of the guys we have now who's just been working for us for a long time, where you'll find me with the Katie Matrosovas story. He launched, and that was pretty bad weather.
Yeah.
In fact, they actually got up there and talking with him, and it's in Ty's book. But, they got up there and they were able to get there. But, the winds being what they were, even if they, had been able to here, they just weren't going to be able to land in it,
Right.
So it's a process where you just kind of make the weather calls. Sometimes they're, all right, I got enough weather to leave Concord. Okay, I have enough to get to this point. I have enough to get to this point. And always having a plan, an out plan, an escape plan of, if the weather does get bad enough, how am I going to get back? So where am I going to go back to? What's my plan? And, I will say, as you guys probably know too, in the Whites, the weather, sometimes the weather is a lot worse than that. You can escape out to the east or the west, get it into the Connecticut River Valley or out towards Conway, where it gets lower in terrain, and you kind of can escape the weather out those directions.
Has the digital improved your ability to respond to weather?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gives you more eyes.
Situational awareness.
Yeah, I gotcha.
The cases where you have these multi-day searches, and I know they don't happen that often, but there's been a handful over the years that I've been paying attention to this stuff. What are those missions like when you are working with very little information? I'm assuming you're taking your lead from Fish and Game around, like, here's where we want you to start, but eventually I'm guessing that, when you're looking for somebody and you don't have a good read on their location, at some point the crew has to just start sort of viewing areas where they think maybe it may be likely. Like, do you just look in all the drainages first, or how exactly does that work?
Well, it's very similar to what, when we, from talking to Fish and Game and some of the rescue guys and the volunteer rescue guys, it's very similar in how they organize. I mean, after you see a few of these over there tends to be a trend on where people go, like when they're lost, and where they go to low areas. They try to get down the mountain and they get off trail. So it is communication in any type of operation is always like probably, this can make or break you. So it can be a big obstacle, or when it's working out great, it can make things go really well. So recently we've had increased communication with Fish and Game and Rescue Services through the use of the Harris radios, the TDF, what we call TDFM radios, but handheld radios. So we can now talk directly to Fish and Game on the ground and their CP. And we used to not, it used to be a matter of, you only had as much information as you got till you climbed in the aircraft and then you were in the air. And, maybe if you were, you might get flight operations, if you could get a hold of them, might get an update by a telephone, then manage to get a hold of the aircraft and let them know some kind of update. But now with air to ground capability, like it has greatly alleviated the process where they can tell us real time, hey, these guys just found a water bottle off trail on the southeast side of the ridgeline. Mm-hmm. They're about, a couple 100 yards down. Can you start there? And they can give us direction on where from the ground perspective. And if nothing else, if there's no indication from the ground crew and everybody's starting from scratch, you just create a grid square search pattern, just like they're doing on the ground, but you're doing it from the air. And we'll focus a little bit more. You go slower over the heavily vegetated areas, and then you can. Wintertime is you got the advantage of the snow for tracks to try to help find things, but I always tell people like it's so wild. Earth tones, man. Everybody loves making climbing and hiking gear in earth tones.
Right.
What happened to the 80s?
Slime green.
So we always, here's my PSA. So I like to hunt a lot, and one of the things I know that like a lot of hunting, you're orange, right? Everywhere's some orange, and out west, especially backpacking, they design all these hunting backpacks that if you get to an area you need to, they have like a little orange flap they can pull out of a hidden pocket. You can drape this big orange flap down over your backpack if you needed to make sure that people could see you when you get into your hunting area. Yeah, they do a similar thing with hiking backpacks because that'd be nice if you could pull that out. That led us to
a question on the script in regards to strobes. I mean, if you're a hiker and you do get in trouble, is that beneficial for your crew to see, like a strobe or certain colors? Or
I think if it's dark out, NVGs. Yeah. I mean, we with the night vision goggles that we use to fly with. Yes, those are great because I mean, I did a last year. I think I had a mission. I think that was the backside of Mount Madison. We had to hoist a woman off the trail, not far from the hut, and people were all with her with flashlights, and we could see it. Like we knew, there they are. Okay. So you don't even need a strobe. Just having a flashlight of any kind. If we're looking for you, a pen flashlight is going to stand out like a beacon for us. Now, where the strobe might be more handful is at dusk. That going from sunset to dark when it's still not quite dark enough for the goggles, but a strobe light that flashing would catch somebody's attention from the cockpit. That would catch our attention from the cockpit for sure.
Gotcha.
Jaime, do you ever have any like if you plan the kids have a birthday party planned or whatever, do you know like he's going to get called out on a mission? Like do you ever have any like a sixth sense on when he's going to get a call?
The vibe.
You just never know, and you never know until it's actually happening too. And he'll sometimes there's a mission coming, and then it doesn't happen until I don't believe it until he's actually out the door and gone, because things change so quickly with the Army. I've learned to be very flexible and fluid. So,
do you tend to stress out, or are you just like, I'll see you when you get home?
Oh yeah, no, I don't stress out about it anymore. I think at the beginning I did a little when I was adjusting for sure, but now we're so happy when he's there, but we know, that could change at a,
How about you?
Quick moment.
Do you have any stress, or do you sleep well at night, knowing that you could get the call like at 2 a.m?
Oh no, the getting a phone call is stress, and it's funny, too. Like on the week, usually the call comes from the boss, Colonel Mattermore, and so, or maybe it's Bill Fish, who's another one of our instructor pilots. He's a standardization pilot at the facility. So when my phone rings on a Saturday, like in the evening, and you look at it, it's one of those two. I'm like, they're not calling to see how my weekend's going. So. No, there's no stress over it though, because we love what we do. And,
sure.
I mean, ideally, you don't want someone to be getting hurt or injured, right? But it's like, a good comparison I heard someone say, it's like playing on the basketball team. Like you practice all week. You don't have to sit on the bench during the game, right? So, we train hoists, we train in the mountains, we train mountain approaches and mountain landings, all that stuff. So it's like we have the skill set. So when we have the opportunity to use it to help, then I think everybody's eager to do it. I mean, most of the guys, in fact, it's really probably the opposite. There's probably a lot of guys that may, for one reason of where they live or whatnot, haven't had the opportunity, some of the younger guys, to do a state mission, and they're looking forward to having the opportunity to come in and do one. So I think, no anxiety over it.
Okay, now what about post-mission services like critical stress, debriefings? I mean, you must have seen some things or some of your crew that have left a mark.
I think that, so usually what we do is like, under high stress moments, you do what you're trained to do, right? So, and I think that people always ask, isn't what you do dangerous or is it risky? And, flying is inherently dangerous because if something goes wrong, you're going to fall out of the sky. But we have so many processes in place, and we train that, we approach it, what can we do to mitigate this risk? And we train hoist very well. We train what we do in the mountains. And because we have a great training program, we have great guys, we have, a small state. So with the small state, you get to be pretty selective on who you have in your group. And we do a pretty good job through the boarding process to bring good people in. So through all that process of doing, like when you get there, it's not like a Top Gun Maverick movie. It's like, okay, this is where we're going to start, where we're going to go. And everybody's kind of all business, and that's how you approach it. It's how you approach, less than desirable weather or a hard place to get into. Things always, and you guys know from your involvement with it that like there's always gonna be little things that go wrong. There's little things like you lowered we had a rescue. We lowered our guy down and he disappeared in the woods. We had our comms with him, but we lost comms with our guy. He disappeared in the woods, and we're still trying to get back to him. And now we're in the aircraft, and this was actually Kinsman Pond. Not last year. We hoisted a woman had fallen, I believe, if I remember correctly, the tent platforms they have up there, she fell off and she messed up her leg in a pretty bad way, and she wasn't going to get off the mountain. So we went in to get her, and it was pretty low ceilings. So ceilings were coming down, that's like, again, that's the same kind of thing where you just make the decision, right? So we talked about it as a crew and said, all right, ceilings are coming pretty down. We don't want to get trapped in that little bowl of where the pond's at. Right. And the ceilings were below the peak already. So we picked a spot on the wall where the rocks were and said, okay, when the ceiling gets below that level of the rocks, it's time to go one way or the other. And it was kind of taking a while to get her, to find her. We lowered down the crew chief because we didn't have a medic. We lowered him down, and Jordan Ford, and he went looking for where she was. And we didn't want to loiter too much because you had all those tent sites up there, and we create a lot of wind. You've seen the aircraft.
Sure.
We don't want to cause any other damage by being up there. So we're off hovering over the pond and trying to check in and figure out what's going on. And in the end, we ended up I believe we had a guy from one of the Pemby Rescue Services, because we actually lowered down threw down the tag line for the basket to come down out of the helicopter. It's a line that holds control of the basket so it doesn't get blown around by the rotor wash.
Right.
And the hoist operator thought it was our guy on the ground, but it turned out to be not our guy. It was a bystander, but they seemed to know exactly what to do. They grabbed the rope. They started working the rope as the basket came down.
Interesting.
They correctly disconnected the tag line and everything like that.
Yeah.
And, afterwards, I guess when Aaron recovered some stuff, I found it was actually one of a gentleman who had done some of our workshops that comes from rescue, that had been to see how it gets
statewide training.
Yeah, the statewide training. So he happened to be there and knew exactly what to do. So it had a happy ending.
That's great.
So yeah, you make those calls. You make those later calls. Like, this is it. This is what we can do. This is what we're going to do. And you just kind of, and then I think sometimes, when you take baby steps, okay, this is the obstacle we're facing. Let's overcome it. Let's get to the next step. Let's get to the next step. All right, now this is the problem. Let's get to the next step. And then sometimes I think you look back and be like, wow, that was one of the more difficult ones. But in the moment, I don't think you really think about how difficult it is. You're just kind of approaching it as, what can we do to accomplish the next task that we need to do?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you kind of look back and be like, oh, that was one of the trickier ones that we've done.
Do you find, are there any of the crew members, I know you talked about sort of spotting geography and figuring out where trails are and summits and things like that. Do you find that there's some crew members that are like total geography geeks that know like the White Mountains by sight, like no problem, they can pick out every summit in every area?
Yes. So we actually had a guy that retired a little while back, that Bruce Goki, who probably was actually listening to this podcast. I'd be surprised when he's an avid hiker. And yeah, if you flew with Bruce, he could, and we didn't have the digital maps then, and he knew where every hut was. If you wanted to go up and somebody said you had to go to Greenleaf Hut, he could take you right there without hesitation. He knew where every pond, every peak, every trail, because he spent a lot of time. He flew for probably, I'm guessing 30 years. So he'd been up there his whole life flying and been up there his whole life hiking. So he knew it like the back of his hand, so to speak. And Jeremy Gray, another pilot we have, is very, he's from the North Country, Groveland. And he is also, again, from both his experience living up here and as well as the amount of time that he spent flying up here, he knows it probably not as well as Bruce did, but he knows it pretty well too.
Wow. And when you're doing training missions, or if you just happen to be doing a flyby on your way to a mission, do you ever just see moose or bear or any wildlife that you spot on out there, or is that not that common?
So it's common. For a while, it seemed like it was common for everyone but me. I had a bucket list to see a moose. I really wanted to see a moose while I was out flying around. And I finally, the Cardigan, we do a lot of practice approaches and landings at Mount Cardigan, just west of Newfound Lake. And I was coming off the back of it one day, and it kind of to the north side. And if you go down that way, as you fly away and down, there's a pond down there. There was a big cow moose. It was summertime. And I found that she was pretty much always there bathing in the afternoon. Oh. So, I could almost depend to do a flyover and see her there if it was mid-afternoon. But so I finally did check that block on that. We see at night. It's funny, as a hunter, I like to get out in the woods, and it seems like you step on a twig and all you hear is the run and the white tail bolting through the woods.
Right.
But yet I go fly up. We have a training area in the Franklin Dam on the river, on the Pemmy up there, north of the Franklin Dam. And we'll come into the LZ and they'll just stare at us, at a hover, winds blowing, grass is blowing. And they just
Isn't that funny?
Not spooked at all by a helicopter, but a twig snapping in the woods.
Right.
Gone. But,
that's interesting.
So yeah, we see deer, moose, bear. You see them running around the woods for sure.
Sasquatch?
No Sasquatch
no
yet.
Sasquatch, no aliens. You haven't seen any aliens?
That was to say, that's a great segue to the aliens. I wish I could say I did, Mike. I keep an eye out, especially under goggles at night. And I think I read somewhere that the White Mountains had this rich history. One part of it had a pretty rich history in UFO sightings.
Well, there's the Benny or Betty and
Barney Hill.
Barney Hill, there was a well-known, in the 1950s, they spotted a UFO somewhere in Franconia.
Yeah, by the Indian Head, right?
They were abducted and then returned. So. Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
We all know, we've seen the current UAP congressional hearings, and believe me, I wish I could give you a good story of a UFO. The coolest thing I've seen in the sky, I see Starlink, the satellites going over from time to time.
Yeah.
But no aliens yet.
Yeah, I think the Hills just got a hold of some of those mushrooms you guys were talking about. All right. Well, we had a search and rescue news piece that we wanted to cover with you. So there was a hiker that was rescued from Mount Lafayette. So this happened on July 30th around 5:45. Fish and Game was notified of a hiker that was having medical issues between the summit of Lafayette and Greenleaf Hut. So this is a 42-year-old female from Gorham, Maine. So I guess apparently they put the word out to the AMC crew, and they volunteered to hike towards the summit to locate this hiker. And with the assistance of the hut crew, she was able to reach Greenleaf Hut around 7:10. Unfortunately, the medical condition worsened, and it was determined she should be evacuated as quickly as possible. So Army National Guard was called to see if they could assist in the rescue. The Guard arrived at Greenleaf Hut around 10:20. So basically the call came in around 5:45, gets to the hut around 7:10, and then the Guard arrives around 10:20, and by about 10:42, you guys had hoisted the victim up into the helicopter, and she was brought to Littleton Regional Healthcare. So could you walk through a little bit the timeline from your perspective on this one?
Sure. I can. So the call went out, I think we had 7:51 p.m. or thereabouts. I feel like I got a call a few minutes before that, but right around that time, the colonel reaches out and says, hey, who do we have available? Who can fly? So it's usually a group text. Text is really the fastest way it happens, right? Group text goes out to all the pilots. We have texting list for pilots and medics and crew chiefs. And so one guy gets in charge of getting all finding the pilots. One guy is in charge of finding the medic and the crew chief. And so text goes out. Guys respond via text. I'm in. I can be there in an hour. I can be there in a half hour. At that point, usually operations and or, maybe Bill Fish or whoever's running the text chain will say, okay, you two, I'll take you two. You can be there. So in this case, it was Mark Stiles. Stiles and Don Killian were the two pilots. They were the closest ones available. We're good to go. They could fly. They're current and hoist, ready to go. So the crew arrived at the facility about 8:30, ready to go and change. And again, we talked a little bit it's funny. I've gotten calls on a Sunday afternoon where it's like I'm home alone with the kids and she's either at work or maybe she's at something in town or with somebody, and it's like I can fly and I know we might have a problem finding somebody. So now it turns into, okay, can I get a babysitter? How fast can I get a babysitter over here to watch the kids? So I text her and say, hey, there's a mission. I got to go. Can you get home? I can't be home for another hour. All right, what if the next door neighbor, shout out to Nageltown, the Nagels are, their daughters, she can come over and watch the kids, so I can hurry up and leave and get to work.
Oh wow!
Well,
that's cool.
The neighbor's kid watches our kids until she can get home. So it takes a village sometimes to get a crew off the ground. So by the time those guys take care of, they show up 8:30 at the flight facility and they start getting right into, like I talked about earlier, the mission planning, looking at the weather, getting the aircraft tugged out, checking the logbook, making sure everything's good to go with that, getting a crew brief together, which is a standard thing we do before every flight. Sometimes in situations we might be crew briefing at the aircraft or while crew briefing en route if it's, we need to go, whether we're trying to beat weather or whether we're trying, the situation is pretty dire. Like I think, we've had a couple where people have taken some pretty bad tumbles and we knew that, timing was probably every minute can count, right? So you try to be as efficient as you can possibly be. So you're right. The timeline was I think they were wheels up about 9:50 from Concord, and then they got on station. What we call on station, but arrived at the scene about 22 or 10:19, 10:20. And the hoisting process can take anywhere from 10-15 minutes to a little bit longer, depending on the situation. Did they have to move them? How many people? Sometimes we've taken up more than one person at a time.
What's the protocol when you're around the huts? I'm assuming like you have to keep a certain distance away just for safety. How far away from the hut do you have to stay?
So that's going to be a decision made by the aircrew too. Like when we get up there, it's a very dynamic environment. So the crew, that's part of the concerns of the crew is, and I've had that where you're hoisting and, we ideally like to hoist from about 75 feet. What 75 feet does, it gets you far enough out of the rotor system, far enough above the ground that it minimizes, it's still going to be rotor wash and wind, but it's bearable from 75 feet up. Mm-hmm. And what that also does is it reduces the amount, you don't want to be up at 200 feet because we can do it from 200 feet if we have to. And you wouldn't feel anything on the ground, but it takes that much longer. The shorter distance the hoist rider is going up and down, the less likely something more complicated could happen during that process. So it's a matter of being brief. So how low can we go? But if you're down around 50 or 30 feet, now you're talking about blowing, we all know there's a lot of dead trees up on the high timber lines and a lot, are we going to blow a branch down off a tree and hit a guy in the head and cause 2 medical emergencies? Right. So the safety of the ground crews and the rescuers is a consideration we always have, and we're always evaluating when we get on scene, and and trying to minimize our impact. So when it comes to being the huts, we'd be as close as reasonable to not injure anyone else or cause any damage to the hut. I don't think that we would. Those things are pretty sturdy, but. The terrain, we also, when you're flying in, you're holding that hoist, you need good references. So it's a combination of being, what is the wind doing? What is the terrain doing? Where am I trying to get the person to? And what can I do to hold this aircraft as still as possible while lowering down the medic and picking them up? So, it's a dynamic environment, but again, I said, we train it and, you train it and you do it over and over, that some of those decisions happen pretty quickly.
Got it. So you're around 10:20. You get there, and it takes you.
So probably the first thing you're going to do is positively identify that this is the spot. These are the people that we're going to. Now, Greenleaf Hut, that's a pretty easy one because there's only one Greenleaf Hut. But if they're not right at a hut, if they're on a trail somewhere, because there are a lot of good hikers, is a pretty good community of people. So a lot of times, if we can't find exactly, we might hit a trail and there's a group of people waving frantically, and then we're like, oh, this must be it. We come up on them, and then they all point up trail. I'm like, oh, okay, it must be further up. Then we get to the next group of people waving frantically, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And then they point up trail. And I think one time on the way to Jefferson, I must have flown over 4 groups of people frantically waving until I found the actual patient that was
That's
injured.
good to know, actually, for hikers that listen. Yeah.
But in the old days, especially for the trail map, that could be very helpful, right?
Sure.
Am I going up trail or down trail?
Gotcha.
So either way, pros and cons. But so finding the first thing, get it on scene, and like, okay, this is it, and then evaluating. Get the medic on the ground. So we'll find a good spot to put him down, and the medic goes down. He gets on the ground. The hoist comes off, and then we move off station. We don't want to lose sight of him, especially if they're in the woods. So we kind of come up and away, so we can kind of monitor and see what's going on the ground. And then now, due to advancements in communication, we can actually talk to the medic, and the medic's like, okay, I got a back injury. I'm going to need the basket. So now we're going to go into the routine of getting the basket out and down to the medic. And that's usually a lot of cases. If they're ambulatory, we'll take the JP. But a lot of times, if they're calling us, it's because the person's not ambulatory.
Yeah.
They're not. So if they're calling us, it's probably going to be a basket lift.
Yeah. Could you explain that a little bit for listeners, the penetrator?
Sure. So we have a device called the Jungle Penetrator. It's a yellow teardrop shaped device. And within it, there's like Velcro straps that you can pull down a step, 3 steps. It's like comes out one in equally spread apart, so that it drops down like on a hinge from the top, so that you can straddle it and sit on it, and you can lift up 2 people. And that's usually what would happen if the guy or girl was ambulatory. The medic would come down and say, hey, especially in sometimes cases we know if they're standing there, like, all right, this is going to be a JP lift. We're not going to waste any time here. Let's lower the medic down. He's going to get the patient, get him secured to it, and then coming right back up. Or more often than not, we lower the medic down. He sends it back up. He takes the JP with him just in case he needs it. And then he realizes, okay, yeah, we don't need a basket. He'll call on the radio and say, hey, just send that hook back down. I'm ready to go. We'll send it down, and he secures himself, the patient, to the JP. They're kind of like facing each other, and they just there's a strap around them, and they come straight up.
Gotcha.
Now, if it's somebody that has to be immobilized, due to a back injury or a really bad leg injury, or they're unconscious, the medic's going to call and say, hey, I need the basket. So at that point, while we'll lower the basket down right away, we have to throw a rope out, so that the tagline, we call it, so they can hold on to the other end of it while the basket comes down. And once it's on the ground, they disconnect it. Cable hook comes back up in the aircraft, and again, we move off station, so we're not disturbing, so he can work. And he'll pack it, he'll, with assistance of whoever's there, he'll get the patient secured into the basket, make sure they're strapped in, and whatever treatment he can do. And whenever he's ready, he calls us. We come back over. Hook comes back down, hooks up to the basket comes up with the tagline still attached to keep it steady. We get it into the aircraft. Hook goes back down, picks up the medic, and then we fly off station and get them to where they need to go.
Quick question about that. So you can drop a medic. I was on one mission on Cannon where you guys came in. Climber had fallen and survived, was in rough shape. So you guys would drop the medic, and then the copter would leave. Was that more for safety of the situation down below?
Yeah. So for the Canyon Cliffs too, pretty easy to find them again once you drop them down on the Canyon Cliffs. So if you're not too worried about finding them again, like in a heavily wooded area where you struggle to find them to begin with, you probably don't want to go too far off because you want to be right back as soon as you can. If it looks like a situation where the communication is going to be like you guys got guys tied to fixed ropes, trying to work on a guy.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You might want to back off so that they can communicate better. And in a situation where it's going to take some time to figure out how we're going to do this, and you can still have radio comms. You're just going to be like, all right. It also relieves pilot. It's easier to go fly in orbit around in a circle than it is to hold a hover off station for a while. It kind of builds fatigue. And if it's going to be an in and out, which is preferred, great. But if not, you might want to go for a loop, stay loose on the controls, and then come back in for the hoist.
Interesting. Yeah. Never forget that one. That was really interesting. And then to finish it all off, you guys split because it was urgent, and the medic was hanging a couple hundred feet below the copter.
That was
as they went south. I was like, wow.
Yeah, that was Joel Coelho. He also didn't forget that.
Yeah.
I didn't get to do that on my spouse flight.
Yeah, no, there was no hoist.
So that was atypical, I guess, because of the urgency.
Well, no, what was atypical about it? So we call that a dynamic hoist. Dynamic is either when you're lowering the medic down as you come in, or more often than not, you're picking up the medic and flying away with it. And
Gotcha.
And again, that is usually to mitigate the disruption on the ground.
Okay.
From rotor wash. It also, if there's an oscillation in the hook, so oscillations can be bad when everything starts moving and swinging. So one of the fastest ways to alleviate that is move. And again, depending on the aircraft, depending on the experience level, depending on the environment, the holding that hoist can be, can wear on you for a while, especially if it's a longer ongoing mission. So it's, the sooner we can move off station, as soon as that medic is up and clear of obstacles or we can fly away, it is better for everybody. Yeah. So that's a common practice to fly away with a medic, but usually you're not flying away over such a steep drop off where you suddenly go from being 40, 50 feet off the ground to now being hundreds of feet off the ground out in the open. Usually they're coming in pretty quick as you're coming down the ridgeline. So they're 60 feet off the ground, 70 feet off the ground. So he jokes about that. He says, I came off 1 minute feet. One minute there was gray, and the next minute I was like, oh. And his comment was, he said, I've always knock on wood, we've never had a mishap, we've never had anything go wrong, and we run a really great program, and I don't expect that to ever change. But of course, you got to figure in the back of your mind, it's just like flying the aircraft, you kind of always got it in the back of your head, if something goes wrong right now, what am I going to do? The options are limited. A guy dangling, a hoist, the medics joke, he's like, I've always accepted that if should anything catastrophic ever happen, I probably won't have time to think about it before I hit. As I looked over 1,000 feet, I was like, I'm going to have time to think about this one.
Wow. Yeah, that's very true.
But that's his story. Yeah, it was a different view for him than he normally sees.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Wow.
Wow, so this has been amazing to learn about sort of the inside baseball around how these missions. So I was watching like a helicopter flying around like 2 weekends ago up by Mount Washington. I'm assuming it was a training flight because there wasn't anything in the search and rescue, but it's just really interesting. And you may not realize this, but like I was out there hiking and I ran across a ton of hikers because it was in the presidentials, and everybody's talking about the helicopter. When a helicopter goes up, everyone's like, oh no, that's not good. So you do draw a lot of attention when we're hiking out there, but we're all happy to know that you guys are there to bail us out if we get in trouble.
Yeah, it's always so we have a great opportunity. Normally, we fly up through Franconia Notch quite a bit on our way north, and the Falling Waters Trail, which we call it the Tripping Hikers Trail. Yes. I'm sure that's not a new thing.
Right.
That seems to be where a lot of our calls come from.
Sure.
And we get to do what we do because we have an area that we can practice and train in, and we appreciate that we have the mountainous terrain to train in, and we value it, and we try to what we call fly friendly. We don't want to be too disruptive. We want to accomplish our training and do what we need to do to be proficient so that we can do that, support that search and rescue program. But at the same time, we don't want to, we want to minimize our impact to the community, so we try to not, we always, one of our things we do when we practice landing is we always do what we call a LZ recon, that we look at wind, obstacles, long axis of the LZ. And then the last one, the acronym of WOLF, is friendly forces or hikers. If we go to train, if there's hikers on that, we're going to go somewhere else. We're going to try to find some place where we don't blatantly, see people hiking so that we don't disturb them, because it is, it's a large aircraft. People are out in nature. And if we do fly by hikers, we try to, give a wave and a tip of the wings, and, it's, let them know that we're here for, My wife was saying the other day that we should probably have a horn. Actually, so we were hiking Dickie Welsh. So today we were hiking Dickie Welsh, and the guys at work knew that we'd be out there hiking. And one of the guys was flying back, flew over Dickie today, knowing that we'd be down there hiking. And
oh yeah.
He's like, you guys need a horn on that Blackhawk.
Well, yeah. A couple notable things you guys always try to get out for the 9/11 hike. Hikers really appreciate that because it really just bolsters the event. But I had a question. Do you guys train up here weekly up on Welch Dickey or nearby? Because I hear you guys all the time.
You do. So
at night.
The back, yeah, you do. So the backside of Dickey. So you know when you're on top of Dickey, and then as you look to the north, you see that rock slab.
Yeah,
that's off trail. We use that for training all the time. That's a very popular spot for training the new guys on how to land and how to put 3 wheels down on a pinnacle. And so we use. And it's a nice spot because it is off trail. So a lot of times we'll see hikers over on Welch or something like that. But we can, and if there are if it's a nice day, and there's a lot of hikers, we may do 1 or 2, and then we try to bug out so that we don't bother anybody, and everybody seems pretty happy to wave and take a few pictures when we do it, and then we move off and fly to another part of the Whites and maybe get another couple practices, approach it, and somewhere else.
That's great. Well, you answered Mrs. Stomp's question. She wanted to know. And I'm like, clearly that's them.
Yes. Wow. And Tuesdays and Thursday nights, you guys probably notice it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, good Luke, time. Jaime, thank you so much for all you do. It sounds like it's a team here, a team effort here, so we appreciate it. And like I said, we sleep well knowing that, we never want to be in a situation where we need a rescue, but we've found over the years, we've analyzed enough of these search and rescue situations to know, like, sometimes you can't control things. You slip and you hurt your leg. There's no easy way to get out, and it's good to know that, we've got you available to come save us if something goes wrong.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Appreciate it, man.
Excellent. And Stomp, I think we'll skip the rest of the search and rescues. We're hitting 2 hours here.
Yeah, it's all good. Until next time.
You're going to let the cats in now so they can play with the cats?
Right. You can take the cats.
Adorable.
Excellent.
Come back again.
We'll catch up with the audience.
Yeah, that was great.
So
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on, and looking forward to hearing the next podcast after this one. I'm glad I heard about it. It's interesting. Thanks, guys.
Oh, good. Yeah, we sound like a podcast. That was Jaime's observation based upon our logo.
Yeah, so you're
sounds like a podcast. Search and rescue.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered in today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information at SLASRPodcast.com. That's SLASRPodcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until then, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some mega peaks.
Now covered in scratches, blisters, and bug bites, Chris Staff wanted to complete his most challenging day hike ever.
Fish and Game officers say the hiker from Florida activated an emergency beacon yesterday morning. He was hiking along the Appalachian Trail when the weather started to get worse. Officials say the snow was piled up to 3 feet in some spots, and there was a wind chill of -1 degree.
And there's 3 words to describe this race. Do we all know what they are? Only one hill!
Lieutenant James Nealon, New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're heading out on the trails to hike here in New Hampshire?
It seems to me the most common is being unprepared. I think if they just simply visited hikesafe.com and got a list of the 10 essential items and had those in their packs, they probably would have no need to ever call us at all.